Today, I want to look at 6 businesses you can't build as an entrepreneur, or rather, you shouldn't. And that's coming from my experience, and I'll also solve you with 2 options that you have and that I think are best to build as solopreneurs. We all have limitations in our lives. We all have difficulties to overcome, and especially as solopreneur, working alone, working on your own, working without a team, without a lot of finances, we have quite the limitations on what we can actually do. And it's interesting because all the big gurus on YouTube tell you this is what you need to do. But if you look closely, they all didn't start that way. And that is what bothers me so much. So we'll check off 6 of these today, that business models that you can't actually do. And on the same note, it is important to understand what actually was the business that got Alex Hormozi the first money, what got Iman Ghazi the first money, what got all the big writers, and like they're all examples, no matter where you look at YouTube, and they all earned their first dollar, their first income with one thing, and then they grew that into other opportunities as they saw bigger opportunities. But we often only see the big opportunities they took, and we're working towards them. And so I need to debunk here 6 business models that will not work for you, just out of common sense, and because, they just don't work for you because of your limitations. So the first one is we can't build a computer game. Most big computer games, also console for that matter, require big money and big team, so they won't work for us. I've recently found a video, I forgot what it was named, but the key essence was like, well, if you want to do a big MMORPG like World of Warcraft, you won't even get there. As a solopreneur, you can't even get started with that, because there's so much going on with story writing, with like design, with programming, with bug fixes, with like all these different things. And then in the game itself, it's like walking, fighting, leveling, different monsters, like open world, the servers behind it. All those make it impossible for you to actually do it. And what I've also seen is the guy that we all talk a lot about is Stardew Valley, the Concerned Ape. He did it, but if you look at Stardew Valley compared to World of Warcraft, or compared to Final Fantasy or The Witcher, there is a huge difference in the size and the scope of the game. And so if you're starting out, you can start with a game, but then it should be a small single game with one mechanic to the game. And I know those might be boring to play, and not many people will play them a long time, but that's what you can actually do. And this is what we'll come back later to actually how to go about this journey. But let's first figure, we can't start with the big computer games. Second of all, we can't build a big app. I know this from my own history. I wanted to build an app, and now I have a print-to-play product, which is quite different in what the product is, but it solves the same problem. And so I think the part is we always get mistaken for wanting to build a huge app. When a huge app, it requires a bigger team to run it and more money to actually pay up front, and then the upkeep is also a lot higher. So we have a lot more working against us than actually for us. Also, the app market is also quite saturated, which also doesn't help our case because we are not known to anybody yet. I mean, look at my YouTube channel. It's pretty small. So it will take time, and you need to buy that time, and you can't do so if you want to develop a big app. The next thing is you can't build social platforms or messengers or anything in that sort, because the market is already super like big, and you need to play with the big players, and many businesses failed. If you look at different like WhatsApp, I mean, you have Signal, you have those as messengers, then you have like Facebook, you have Instagram, you have Threads, you have like, there's just so much already from one company that it's hard to compete with, like Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat. I mean, there's so much out there that it's super hard to start a new social platform, because the hype is just hard to get behind one of these apps nowadays. And the same goes for messenger apps, because there are already so many that many use. And for me, I'm also thinking like, oh, so I have Telegram, normal messages, then WhatsApp and Signal. So I'm using 4 messaging apps, which is already way too much, but because so many people use different ones, but that's why I'm so hesitant to add another one on top. Same goes for Discord. We have already chats. We have all those things. So why add another one? That same goes to Google. Like we can't build the next Google. The market is already hard enough, and as a solopreneur, we shouldn't even try to compete with those markets, because that's the difference to the social apps. The social apps, I think, there's just a limited amount of apps or social platforms we can actually attend to as a consumer. But here it's also, don't try to compete with the biggest businesses in the field when you're starting out with a solopreneur. They have millions in research, they have millions in marketing, and they have decades behind them. Don't pick that fight. So the next thing is, we shouldn't start building a consumer product, because noodles, makeup, sure, they work, and I've seen people getting them to work, but the problem with that is they have such a high risk to actually win. At the same time, they have a lot of third parties involved, which you can't control. And since you're the little one on the table, nobody's gonna make time for you. And that's interesting. So one example, it's not necessarily in the specific like consumer market, but what I've seen, and that leads then to the next one somewhat, is, for example, road constructions. There are a few huge players that will get first dibs if they need more like concrete or like asphalt for the street. But if you're a small company, you're not gonna get some extra benefits. So you need to like work with the schedules that the third parties will give you, and not the ones that you need. And that's just difficult. Also, you have a lot of stock in inventory that's costing you a lot of money with not knowing if it's actually selling. That's just a lot of risk that I'm not willing to take as a solopreneur, because it's just so tricky to do. We are dabbling with Etsy sales, but those are print things that we can do at home. We have a bit of stock, but we don't actually have the finished product in stock. We print it as it's sold. And so that's like where you can find nuances to the products that you can actually provide. But that's tough if you're going out on a big consumer market that you need to serve a lot of stock with. The last one is, we can't start a construction business or a legal business or any other certified business where we actually need to have a certificate if you don't already have it. So for my personal position, I have certificates in forestry and in education, and so I can use those. But if you don't have them, if you want to start a business fast, it's hard to get out of your way to get the certificate to actually start. They're just much easier businesses to start and to focus on in the beginning. And so this is not something where it's you shouldn't start them. There are people always starting them and they succeed, but you can't start them as soon as you might want. And so what does that leave us with? If these 6 business models are so hard to do, and these 6 markets are just so hard to compete, we can do 2 things. And one thing is recommended by many is to start a service, to start off selling your skills and your time, which is most of the time as a freelancer. Or you can start with a micro product, and this is my preferred way of doing things. So many things that you see that we talked about, these 6 here, you can actually start in one way or another the road in that direction. And that's something that is quite fascinating, because you can actually compete with Google. If you're playing the long game, in 20 years, you can compete with them. If you took like small, really micro steps, and that's where it comes in. Like, we're really zooming in on something that the big ones can't even provide. But I'm still staying away from some of these restrictions because they're just too limiting for me. So if you want to know more why I prefer a micro product over a service, then I have the right video up here for you. Go watch that next and you'll know why.